Good morning, everybody. How is everybody doing on this beautiful Friday? We are, I was going to say we're free. We're free of the greased piglet, but we're not quite free of him yet. Of course, how you feel about that may vary, but I assure you most of us up here are pretty happy. As if to celebrate, we've arranged this little demo. This is the third of three. To show you MPS Analyser. In past sessions, we've shown you how to run quick comparisons between providers, and then we've shown you portfolio performance comparisons last week, which was a little bit more involved. This is the most involved of the three, and we'll put them all up on YouTube once this one is done, so that you can go back to them and see them in the past. If you've been on the previous ones, you'll have spotted that Natalie is looking really very, very rough this week. She's lost most of her hair, and
it's been a tough week.
Tough week for Nat, and she's transmogrified into Terry. But that's good in its own way, because Terry is the absolute expert in all things Analyser, having built it. So any technical questions you may have, anything you would like to know, then Terry's your man. I hope most of you have done one of these before. You'll know how Crowdcast works. There is an ask a question bar down the right and a chat bar, and you're very welcome to use that, and I'll keep monitoring that as well as we go through. There's also an ask a question button on your screen, and that pops up a little question thing for me. So I'll make sure that we answer all the questions that you ask. The green button at the bottom is where you go to sign up for Analyser if you haven't done so already. There's no point pretending anything else. We really, really, really hope that you'll find that Analyser is something you'd like to have as part of your practice. And obviously, if you want deeper demos or anything like that, then we're happy to do that. Last little bit of housekeeping. We'll be together for about 30 minutes, maybe a little bit less. And I can also recommend, if you've got any sound issues, then follow the little link I just put in the chat. It delays your feed by a couple of seconds, nothing too terrible, and that gives everything time to catch up with itself and usually sorts out any problems that you may have. So what we're going to do today, well, we're going to build a shortlist of MPS providers that are suitable for your target client segment. Now, there's two ways of doing this, right? The first way is to actually go through step by step, typing things in and doing all that kind of stuff. And I suspect A, that would take a little bit too long, and B, would be brain death for all of you. So we're going to do it the other way around. We're going to start with the output, and then we're going to show you how we got there. So Terry's got one here that we've prepared earlier, and we'll just chat through what Analyser's here to do, how it goes about this, and the process that we bring you through. So Terry, shall I bring you in here, and shall we focus in on this little bit of output, and you can talk about what everybody's seeing, and then we'll use that as our jumping off point.
Absolutely. And Mark, can you prompt me when I go too slow or anything like that? So,
go fast.
Hi, folks. As Mark said, so we sometimes do this where we walk through the whole process from start to end. What we're looking to achieve in this half hour that we've got together is to articulate to you the process of how we do it, rather than do the whole thing in front of you. In order to have a shot at doing the process, there's a number of ways we can help you. If you're an Analyser subscriber, we're always happy to set up a one-to-one demo with you, and we can do that in light of looking at your own specific client proposition and plugging that into things. Or some people just prefer to take the free trial and have a play themselves. Everyone's got a different preferred approach, but we're here to support with either way or any ways that you want to do it. What we'll hope to get across today is the steps that you need to go through without actually going through all the steps. So as Mark said, we're at the penultimate stage of doing an MPS due diligence exercise here, which is this stage 9 up at the breadcrumb trail here. And where we've got to just now is we've got a draft report, and we've got what we would describe as a shortlist. So what we've done is, for all the providers that we have in MPS Analyser and all their individual ranges, each provider tends to have typically 3 to 5 ranges. Some just have one, but effectively we've assessed over 50 ranges here. We've got that down to a shortlist by working through this 9-stage process. So what that's given us is a draft PDF and a draft report of who our shortlist is. And everything that you can see in the report is what's made up of those 9 stages that go before it. And we will jump through those 9 stages to describe what they are. We'll just not labour on it too much. But what we do is start off by telling the system what our client proposition is for the target client segment that you're doing this due diligence for. That then will bring you out with, we have got to the point where we have a short list of providers. So that's Tatton, Brooks, McDonald and Sparrows in this case. No, we're not favouring or anywhere, anything like that. This is, as you can see at the top, this is a fictional exercise that we've done for demo purposes, but this is who we have as our shortlist, and we have why these MPS ranges are on our shortlist. So we're backing up the reasons why. And we also have all of the providers and ranges in an audit trail here. And why we've not selected them and the phase that they've been eliminated. So that's the other part of this, is we've gone through all the providers and ranges and had a justification of who we are and aren't using for our client proposition. At this stage, we're not quite ready to do overall conclusions, but we've got these 3 in our shortlist. And from here on, what we can decide to do is, once we have done some extra work in terms of that very final bit of due diligence where you probably speak to the BDM, you might get a wee demo from the platform you're using and see how it works there, and the other things that you might look at some other systems in terms of different types of underlying asset stuff and things like that. You can then nail that down and decide who is and isn't in your shortlist before creating your PDF. Unfortunately, the main report I had prepared earlier, I had a little bit of a snafu, so I don't have any example text in here. However, we will add a full example report onto Analyser, which you'll find in the Insights tab, and you can see all of the, as an example, the sort of information we've put into our one. So that's where we are. And then what I'm just going to do now is jump through those 9 stages. So I'll go right back to the start.
So before you do, or while you're getting that ready, let's talk for a moment about what MPS Analyser is here to do. And a lot of it's down to what questions you ask. I'm sure some of you are Analyser subscribers anyway. If you're not, it's important to say that the process that we're about to take you through is designed to be robust and defensible suitability process, where everybody calls it due diligence, and we fought against that for ages because due diligence got a particular meaning, I think. But screw it, it doesn't matter. Everybody just calls it this, but it's suitability really is what it is. And so suitability to us resides in a number of different areas. And I think the key thing in MPS when we're assessing suitability is to check that the questions we're asking are the right ones. So, for example, suitability does not reside in past performance. It can't do, for the very obvious regulatory reasons that we all know. But actually, when we look at how firms have been assessing MPS providers, very often past performance is used as a much more structural part of decision making than it would be for multi-asset funds. And the reason for that is that MPS is pretty opaque. It's pretty hard to compare what's going on there. So from our point of view, if we want to ask better questions, then we need to surface lots of other detail. And that's what we're going to take you through now. So we operate a series of knockout rounds, and we'll show you what those are. And as you move through those, you narrow the jaws of suitability. So we're knocking out things that are clearly unsuitable, and we're documenting it as we go. Then we're knocking more out based on other factors. I'm trying not to steal Terry's thunder here. Then we talk about performance at the end of the process. And that's important because just like with platforms, you can have suitable platforms that are expensive and suitable platforms that are cheap. But price, isn't the same as suitability. It's something that you consider, but it's not, the only thing to consider. It just happens to be something very easily to spot, and so people use it. Performance for MPS is like price for platforms. So it's quite possible to have suitable MPS ranges that have performed relatively poorly over a particular time frame, or very well over a particular time frame. That doesn't mean that they're the ones that you pick or don't pick. Another thing that happens when you put a real process on stuff like this is that some of your own gut feel, another word for that is prejudice or preference or whatever, it starts to be harder to accommodate some of that because we're adding objectivity to a process. And so we've already seen, Terry and I were talking about this before we came on, we've already seen with a firm that we were working through something with, we saying, well, which is the best performing one? And the answer is, well, that's not the right question to ask, right? That's something that you ask when you've already got rid of everything that is unsuitable for your client. And once you're down at that shortlist, then it's time to go to work out which of the 2 or 3, whatever it is, you really, really want to make part of your life. And that's when we start getting into things like performance attribution and all that stuff, which Analyser doesn't do. But Morningstar just launched a new comparison system that gets into all that stuff. FE has one, ARC has one. We know all these systems, we like them very much. They just do a different job to what it is that we do. So we take you to the water's edge here, and then depending on how wet you like to get, you can get wet up to your ankles, your knees, or up to your oxters if you want, by analysing in-depth individual portfolios and ranges on those systems. My contention would be is that suitability doesn't reside in there. Suitability resides in what we take you through here. And the objective demonstration of that is what helps you not only be confident in decisions you've made, but also evidence them in a way that as we get into consumer duty and all that side of the world, that things really work for you. So I'll shut up now. And Tez, do you want to take us through some of these steps?
Yeah, absolutely. So whilst Mark was chatting about that there, I jumped over to the My Firm bit because this is where things really start. This is where the matching suitability to your needs and particularly your client's needs really starts. An Analyser for us. So for each client segment that you have, whether you have one or more, what we do is get you to build that, and that then seeds your report. So investment solution, a description of a current investment proposition you're using, which might continue to be the same one once you've done a bit of work, or it might not, and also about your firm's investment philosophy and what portfolios you're using. We will very soon, ahead of Consumer Duty, add a few more things into this around target client descriptions and that sort of thing, so that can be plugged in. And we feel this already will Consumer Duty proof you, but we're going to make it even more Consumer Duty bulletproof pretty soon. So watch out for that happening. But that's where it all starts. So that means that when I create a client segment, and I'll go back to where I was in the due diligence report, and back to the start there, that means that when I create a client segment at the first stage, I can pull that through, and that's what will then show in my report. So I'm building the report from the client segment to start off all the suitability journey. So then about articulating more about your current situation. No information is wrong, but good things to have as the platforms you currently use to deploy your investment proposition, and more about client profile and about your investment proposition and philosophy. Again, we can see things like that in our example report. So moving quickly through, once we've done that stage 9 that you saw with the report, everything I do from here on in will be pulled through as an audit trail. So both the data things, so the yeses and the nos, and also the subjective information that you put in as justifications when you're deciding which providers or ranges to to use. So as Mark said, what we're going to now do is narrow the jaws. So from this stage 2, we're looking specifically at the providers, and this is the bit that I think where in the world at large, the term due diligence tends to mean looking at the provider. So as a business, you're looking at working quite closely or using a product or integrations with a particular business. You do due diligence on the business. So that's this part with MPS, with the MPS provider. We have financial metrics, scale and profit and loss, which you can look at. What that will then do is bring you through to a screen where you have everything at provider level, all the providers that we've got in the system. And what you can then do is decide who to take forward and who not to take forward. And every other step then works on that basis. And what it's about doing is putting in a comment for each provider as your justification. I probably would, AKG not rated might be one if you're hanging your hat on AKG, or it might not. It's the way I would describe it is it's building your own research requirement and building a bespoke algorithm, if you like, based on your firm throughout this whole thing, so you can come out with the suitability results at the end. So each screen then works like that. So that's why I'll not labour on each one, but what we do is once we've gone through the provider screening part, we've narrowed the jaws a bit because we've got some left in the process. We're then going to look at the features that's important to support your client proposition, your client segment, target client suitability. And we're looking at ranges here now, not providers. So we've got lots of ranges to assess. It happens to be one where it's for my ESG client segment. So those ESG things I've put as must-haves, but it depends on what you're doing it for. And it works on the basis of looking through all the data that's available and allowing you to select or not select it. And you can go back and forward as much as you need to. It's not a system where when you move to one screen, it hard codes things in and it's difficult to go back. It's very flexible to go back and forward. It's also very flexible once you've completed a report and locked it down to go back into the report and rerun it. That's where the real beauty of this, we think, the due diligence module in Analyser kicks in, because it's very, very quick to get an updated due diligence report, and it makes that keeping on top of your suitability and DD very efficient, we think. We've seen that.
Yeah, we've seen it in platforms where people were saying, well, how often do you do due diligence? For most firms, I think it was somewhere between a year and every 2 years on platforms. But we're seeing now with Analyser, firms doing an updated report every quarter in some cases. And then from an investment standpoint, if you're having quarterly investment committee meetings and you need an output from that to say, has anything major changed that might make what we're using more or less suitable, then this is custom made for that. So the first time you go through and set your parameters, it takes a little while. It's not instant, but it can't be because the system doesn't know you. But once we know you and we know what you want for that target client segment, or that could even be an individual client if you want, we've got people using the system that way, then the second time it's like that. And it just pulls the new data through anything that's changed that we've got. And that's pretty powerful, we think.
Absolutely. So that's me got on to stage 6 now, where I've screened out quite a lot of portfolios or ranges, I should rather, at this stage, because I'm mainly looking at responsible ones or ESG or whatever market name each provider calls what some people call ESG and some people call other things. We're never quite sure, but we've got a bit. ESG seems to work for us just now as a term for how we describe the data point in this system. That might change. So we've looked at the phased out based on the feature results. We're now having a look at portfolios, so we're getting down to a lower level. We've been looking at range level. We're now looking at the specific portfolios within each range that's left in the process, and we're looking at things like estimated yield, the portfolio charge, and the total OCF. And we also have in here the risk ratings to each of the main risk raters that the ranges are aligned to. Not all are aligned to each risk profiler tool, but you can see that if there's a blank. We've got one or two to add here that we're currently working on, but we've got all the main ones there, as you can see. Then, based on the portfolio level information, which might be thinking about things like particularly the OCF or the risk rating, or launch date, for example, in terms of if you're interested in a particular track record or to be able to assess for your investment committee or whatever it might be. Again, it's a case of deciding which ranges to take forwards and which not, and give it a justification for either for better or for worse, so it then copies that through to your final report and gives you an audit trail. I'm now on to the bit where we look at performance. This is pretty much the last thing we look at. As Mark said, if it performs well and it's unsuitable, it's still unsuitable. So what we want to have left in the running here is that we've been able to establish that the ranges that we're looking at has passed all those other tests based on your own requirements, your bespoke algorithm that's being applied, and we've got performance and volatility over 1, 3, 5, 7, and 10 years. You can also get a view on time and market from here, because as you can see, because these are the ESG ranges, they're all pretty young because ESG is a fairly recent thing. If you were looking at the passive or active ranges, a lot more of them you have left would tend to be able to see a 10-year track record, but it's quite common just now for them to only have 1 year, for example, and that's just what it is. That will obviously change as time goes by. It's worth mentioning a bit here on how we collect and Mark, you'll probably have something to mention on this as well, I guess. We collect the data directly from the MPS providers. We collect it at the end of, just after the end of each quarter, and it updates to the 1, 3, 5, 7, and 10 years on a cumulative basis to the end of the data at the quarter that's just ended. Most of this just now is to the end of Q1, but as you can see just now, we're out in the field just now doing Q2. We'll be actually sending a request to the providers on Monday just to put that in. They can all do it pretty quickly after the quarter end. That's how we do it. We ask for it on a net basis of both fees and DFM charges. A few give us gross, but the differences of that we don't think are that big, but we call the ones out that do give us gross by putting a little star next to them so you can see that. Anything else on performance, Mark, you want to mention?
Well, there's quite a lot, and if you want to dig into the performance stuff, watch the previous demo back. As I say, that'll be up on YouTube. Somebody said to me that they didn't like us pulling data from the providers because it was like them marking their own homework, and that's quite a funny line, but it's not very accurate. These guys are subject to proper regulation. They can't publish misleading information. They can muck about by giving us gross or net. And as Terry says, nearly everybody gives us net. There are 4 providers, 3 currently, another one coming, that work on gross. And that's gross of DFM fee, not gross of the OCF of the underlying assets. And those are, remind me, Terry, it's Betafolio, Brooks Mac, LGT, and EBI.
Yeah.
So we've asked them all to move to net. Because that we think is fairer, and some of them are a bit grumpy about it and don't want to do it because I guess they think they look better if they show gross. I think that's daft personally, but fine, right? It's all within a kind of controllable view of the world as long as you know who's doing it. What we don't do is what FE, Morningstar, ARC, those kind of guys do, where we reconstruct the portfolios day by day based on weightings to try and create very, very detailed performance comparisons that you can perform over custom date ranges, where you can get down into performance attribution analyses and look at, slightly underweight on Uzbekistani yak futures. Did slightly better for you there than it did there. And the reason for that is that there are places that do that already, but also That's not the same as suitability. What we're trying to do here is build a short list of suitable MPS providers that you can then go to town on as much or as little as you like. But one of the things I think, I did this in the update this week, that I think is kind of odd, is that firms that are clearly outsourcing investment on the basis that you neither have the time nor the skill, depending on your view, to do it yourself, are then trying to be investment analysts of the stuff that they've outsourced to. And I think there's a balance to strike there, and I worry that people are getting it wrong. And what it also does is it injects back in that subjectivity. Well, I don't like that portfolio because they're slightly heavy in large cap European equity at the moment. Oh yeah? And that would be a good or bad thing. Why? Are you an investment analyst or are you a financial planner? Or are you both? If you're both, or you're an investment analyst, shouldn't you be having your own discretionary permissions and running these things yourselves? That's kind of a combative way of talking about it. But I think there's something in there about spurious accuracy on past performance. There is only one way that I found of getting completely accurate past performance, and that is from a client's own valuation report on a platform where all charges are there in real time. And this actually goes to the heart of a lot of the MiFID II changes, ex ante and ex post disclosure, and the differences between the two. Now, we can dance on the head of a pin with this stuff, but in terms of looking at a broad market, narrowing that down to suitable providers for whatever it is you're trying to do for your clients, and then using your own skill, judgment, preferences, prejudices to get to a final answer, then I think this process that we're taking you through, where we look at the providers, we look at the features of the ranges, we look at some level of detail in terms of risk mapping, charges, platform availability, and then a quick check on performance. We think that's enough to take you to a point that says, okay, great, that's where we are. I am now looking at a graph here on Analyser. Well, I'm not, because Terry's scrolling up and down. But on the performance bit, I'm now looking at a group that are relatively together in a cohort. That's a very typical thing to find. But I've got an outlier. These guys are shooting the lights out, or these guys are terrible. I wonder why. And that, to me, is where you then go to town and start trying to work out what's going on. So here, if it was, I think that's a BMAC one, the top of their risk range, Vol 6, has shot the lights out compared to everything else. Okay, and it's doing it for quite a lot less vol. What's going on? How have they done that? Is there a quirk in the data that we don't know about? Or actually has something really interesting happened there? And if so, is that replicable? Do we think we're going to get bang for our buck on a prospective basis as opposed to just a retrospective basis? These are hard questions, and you can't systemize them in the same way. So again, we take you to that water's edge, and then you guys are the pros. You're going to go at it from there. And depending on what kind of pro you are and how much of this you like to do, you can either have great fun at it for a long time, or breeze over it and just get on with your day, or your paraplanners or your analysts, whoever it is that you use. So that's kind of the sort of ethos. The way we've built it is to try and be usable, good enough to get you to a suitability definition that is meaningful for you, that you can stand in front of, and then obviously there's no end of investment analytics that everybody can do.
Cool, great, thanks, Mark. Then, as Mark was chatting about that there, I showed you the final bit where you can look to check if the ranges that you've got to that penultimate stage are available on the platforms that you use, which for a lot of people is quite important. It's also worth mentioning, though, that some MPS providers aren't available on any platforms. We will be adding them to Analyser. It just means you have to go direct for them, and that, whether that you decide that's a good thing or a bad thing, that can be a deliberate strategy. Some ranges of some providers as well who are on platform don't have certain ranges on platform. You have to go direct for those ranges. So we bring all of that out in that tick and cross bit that I was showing you. So now we're back to the stage we started on. We've gone through that screening process. I've got the shortlist in place with the comments and the justifications. A very big audit trail of data. If I was to click on this, it would download a spreadsheet that would show absolutely everything in the features comparisons part, which will live there forevermore. And at the point where I create this report and save it, once I've finished doing the final checks and writing the justifications, in fact, I'll just do that just now. Let's imagine I've done that. It will create the report. It will now be here. I've got this view history bit where this is all the times I've been into this report and the dates. Each one of these that I'll look at will have the audit trail for that specific day and specifically what the situation was when you did that report. This is why we've got people doing due diligence more frequently. And if I then want to rerun that report, whether it be in 3 months from now or 6 months, or indeed tomorrow because I've made a typo or something like that, what I could do is edit report. I can choose to refresh the data, which you probably would do, because it will then bring in updated performance, updated any new providers that have been added, any changes that any providers have made. Each of the MPS providers on Analyser have their own portal, so they go in and control their own data. They make proposition changes, launch new things, all that sort of stuff. Analyser keeps a watchful eye on all of that, so when you do your due diligence, you're bang up to date. As Mark said before, now it's learned you. Now you've created the report, you've created your firm, you've told it your likes and dislikes and the things you need and the things you don't need. When you do rerun that report, you effectively, if nothing much has changed for you, you can go through it pretty quickly and get an up-to-date report for all your compliance and business sharing purposes. We think it's worth doing it once a quarter, particularly with MPS, because that gives you a reasonable look at what's happened with performance over that quarter. A lot of users have told us that they plan to use it in that way, but because it's so quick, once you've done the original building, it's always good to have an up-to-date report. And we would say that, but that's what we're trying to bring.
Definitely. Okay, listen, we're at time. I'll just let you know a couple of very quick things, and then we'll leave it for today. The first is the range of providers that we have is, how many is it, Terry? 14, 15 at the moment?
Just now, 14.
14, and we've got roughly the same again in development. Our intention over time is that we'll get up to, there's about 80 providers we think that are selling into your space. So we intend to get them all eventually. We're overwhelmed with providers that want to do it, frankly, and each one we set up individually in the back end. They've got a data portal where they upload their stuff and all that kind of thing. And then we check it all through them, work with them to get them live, and there we go. That's a free process for them. They don't pay, which is still blows their minds. But for us, the value is having them on and having their data. So we want to do that. John, thank you for that question. It's an excellent one. It can't be. 14 providers can't be representative of 80, right? But we're getting there. So we've got a lot of the big ones on there. So BMAC, Bruins, Tatton, AJ Bell, these kind of guys. There's a couple of real biggies coming on. And then there's this huge long tail of either specialist or quite small providers on there. Betafolio's on there as well, which I know a lot of planners are very keen on. So we've got a good sample at the moment. We've worked very closely with a lot of these guys to be our originals. There was 8 originals that we basically built Analyser with. And it's a matter of weeks, Terry, really, for getting a bunch of these other guys on. So I would say we're in process. I would say give us a few weeks. I'll feel much more confident that we've got a representative sample of the big end of the market there. And if that's a concern for you, I would wait 3 or 4 weeks to see before signing up. But in the fullness of time, we'll drag them all in. And the good thing is, because we're not charging the DFMs for this, we're not going to get the sort of commercial hassles that a lot of the other systems out there do. We've just turned it on its head. to try and make sure that everything's done as cleanly as it can be. Also worth saying that no provider can get a premium listing or a rating from us or anything like that. There's no commerciality in this at all with the providers. They can buy a subscription to Analyser, a kind of corporate subscription, and that's fine. But that doesn't change anything in terms of how their listing appears or joint promotional activity or any of that stuff that most of the other systems out there do, because they got to make their money however it is they want to make it. We only make money from subscribers, and we've got no interest in doing anything else. So we're going to try and keep this as pure as you kind of would expect from us. It's as pure and independent as we possibly can make it. And to make that work, firms have to sign up and use it, frankly. And to that end, the cost of Analyser, which gets you platform and MPS, is £300 a year. You can pay it monthly or annually. We don't mind. If you pay it monthly, there is no contract. You can stop anytime you like. And there's a free trial that you can use and have a go with and all that kind of stuff as well. So if platforms and MPS and properly evidenced decision making is important for you, I think this is worth a bash. It's certainly not a high ticket purchase for firms. We're fully aware of that. You also don't, most firms, if you're under 5 or 10 people, Terry, in terms of the people giving advice, you only need one license. You don't need to sell you a bunch of different seats or any. It's not like a CRM or that kind of thing. And so you'll get that. You'll also get all the latest research that we produce, the annual guide to platforms, a quarterly insight pack that tells you what's going on in the market. That's quite platform centric at the moment, but that's going to change and become more, bring more MPS stuff into it as well as time goes by. And our undying appreciation and gratitude, which is the most valuable thing of all. And that's it from us. I wish you fair sailing on your Friday afternoon. Remember, don't open the bottle till 4 o'clock. And hope you all have a brilliant weekend. If you want to watch this back at any stage, it'll be up on YouTube at the start of next week. And we appreciate your time as ever. If you'd like to have a look at Analyser, hit the green button at the bottom. And until then, Lancat out.
Yeah.